How do you feel when you try to take part in a group? It's super common for those of us who grew up with abuse and neglect to feel as adults that we are somehow not quite part of things. Do you have this? Where you feel like you're on the outside of groups, kind of in it, kind of not in it, but never really part of it. Or you start as a full participant, but then you pull away over time. You uninclude yourself. I've done this so many times. Now maybe you're resigned to the fact that groups are just not for you, but belonging is important, and it's a real need that all people have. So you might be still trying, joining groups, getting uncomfortable, or feeling excluded, and then dropping out again. And maybe you think in each case that the problem is other people, and sometimes that could be true. But the telltale sign that this could be a personal choice, even when it doesn't feel like it, is that you're almost always at about the same distance from the center. And by that I mean every group has a center, a leader or two who are at the very middle, and then all around them are the people who put a lot of time and energy into the group. And a little further out are the people who are involved and influential, but not as much as the people near the center, and so on. Now, in my case, I used to always like to settle at about 80% out from the center, invited to the party, but not responsible for making the party happen. And a lot of times I'd start out motivated and thinking, you know what, this group is great. I've finally found my people. I want to be involved with this. And then I'd move towards the very center of the group, maybe take on a more active role, maybe even a leadership role. And then sooner or later, probably sooner, I would find some reason to pull back. I might go to about 40% out of the circle first, but eventually I'd bounce out of the group altogether. So being part of something was, and in some areas of my life it still is, really uncomfortable for me. So why is that? I used to think my trouble with groups was just one episode of bad luck after another, the wrong coworkers, the wrong mom's group, the wrong 12-step friends, and I'd think, I guess I'm just really different. These people don't get me. And I never saw that it was a consistent pattern until I had a lot of healing from dysregulation and I started to have some clarity. And it makes sense because being in a group, when you have the sensitivities of childhood PTSD, can be too much. People are triggering, right? And groups of people, it's like a bunch of triggering people and the group dynamic that brings up all your pain about belonging and fitting in and all the times that that didn't happen. So dealing with a lot of people can be like an assault on your senses. And it gets really emotional. It's like a high school experience that just never stops. So childhood PTSD, it's not the same thing as introversion, but I suspect there are similarities in that being social with people can take more energy than it gives because you're just working so hard to act normal, to deal with it all, you know? But the thing is, when we need people, we need them on a practical level, and we need relationships if we're going to start healing the wounds of trauma, which are largely relational wounds. They affect your nervous system, but they were caused by what happened between you and other people, you know, namely your parents. So the healing needs to happen before you have social relationships, but also it needs to happen within social relationships. The little interactions is where you get to practice what you're learning and where you get nourished emotionally, even though sometimes there's pain involved. There's criticism and rejection and genuinely being different in a group where everyone else seems to feel connected. But all that can get easier. So like everyone else, you need a sense of belonging. So it's natural that you'd gravitate to groups, but toward the outer edges at first. It's a little more manageable. You can be around people and be social a little bit, but just keep one foot out the door in case you need to get the heck out of there. It's okay to do that, by the way. Healthy groups have roles and space for many kinds of people, and it's okay not to participate fully for a while. Life would be great if you could keep going like this, just soaking up the group belonging feeling, not risking your emotions by getting too involved. But the problem is that relationships that are all on the periphery of groups make it really hard to develop meaning in your life. You need some friction. You need some contact with people to develop social skills. Everyone needs this. And staying on the periphery keeps contact shallow, so you don't get that. that's what we want at first, is to be out here. That's how we can keep from setting off old triggers. But shallow connections, they take a toll. The connectedness that you crave is more like a future fantasy. And in the present, you're still isolating. And then what starts as a kind of delay in your development can become a full-on deficiency. And next thing you know, you're getting more isolated than ever. That is how it happens. By playing it safe, you stay stuck. You need to be taking some risks to grow your comfort zone a little wider, a little wider. There are these normal ups and downs involved in having friends and being part of groups. If you're not continuously growing through experiencing the normal ups and downs of being in friendships and groups, you risk not only not being included anymore, but you can start to get hard to include. And what it is, and this will sound harsh, but avoiding people leads to self-centeredness. Not sharing yourself with other people, it's an emergency protection measure, but it's not a way to live your whole life. The possibility of sharing yourself is all around you. You can agree to bring something to a potluck dinner, you can join a choir or take a quilting class or invite friends out for a hike. When you show up for people in your life, you grow less fragile and more flexible and more connected and more included. And yes, it's demanding to be included. And isolation sounds so peaceful as an option. But if you allow isolation to take root, long term, it will take over. And your very worst traits will have this huge, fertile, empty space to take root. People in isolation grow crabbier, they get more self-centered, they get more bitter, they get more paranoid. And then it gets harder to turn the ship back towards connection again because you've gotten too eccentric, too awkward. I've called this turning weird on YouTube before. And some people have complained that I was being unfair, but I think it's fair. I know that isolation definitely made me a weirder version of myself. And I don't mean good weird. Have you ever felt this beginning to happen to you? Have you seen it in other people? I mean, I really noticed it in myself and other people, in fact, when lockdown was ending and I started being able to hang out with people again. I was rough on the edges. I talked too much. I wouldn't know what to say. I was a little angry, a little edgy, and gradually I kind of got my bearings again. So take your alone time and then keep chipping away at your capacity to stay connected. I know many of you watching this video are there right now wondering if any change is possible or worth it. And I just want to tell you, yes, it is possible, and yes, it is worth it. You just start with one small action. You just show up. So I teach a bunch of ways to do this in my Connection Boot Camp. That's a 30-day course that helps you keep taking positive actions each day, and you develop new skills for having relationships. You can explore that down in the description section. There's a link down there if you want to check that out. But for today, take a shower, put on your coat, go say hello to some people, go back to a group you used to like, pay a visit to a friend you've been neglecting, sign up for, a cleanup day at the beach or a blood drive or whatever community get-togethers are just happening. It doesn't have to be really exciting. It just gets you out of the house so that you can show up. And if you do one thing like this every other day, in a couple of weeks, you're going to find yourself included again. The need to be included is not just a weakness, it's primal. We're born into community, and as much as we want to escape it sometimes and be independent, we never can be, not totally, not really. And evolutionary biologists will tell you it's a survival strategy so that you have warmth and food and protection from predators and so on. But it's not just physical. Inclusion is just as important for the growth and development of your being, your intellect, your spirit. Because without inclusion in human relationships, the blossoming of your whole real self is arrested. It can't fully happen. Fulfillment cannot come to you. So being included and connected is also crucial for your physical health, for your brain health. It wards off dementia. It creates a support system of people who care about you and who can come to your aid if you're broke or lonely or feeling like your life is falling apart. You're not meant to go through all that alone. You've probably done it before. I have. But let's just say right now that we should never have to go through life's hardships alone, ever again. Healing can bring that connection back to you. One-on-one relationships are one thing. If you have childhood PTSD, those can be just as hard as being part of a group. You need both. And I know it feels hard, and that's because it is hard. But keep trying. Keep participating. The reward for that is that you get to be included, and included is secretly really what we all want. That's where we want to be. Isolating is an almost universal symptom of PTSD from childhood, or for anyone with wounds from trauma. There's what it looks like from the outside, and then there's what it's like in here, the real reason that we shy away from other people, even when we want more than anything to have love and connection in our lives. So isolating can take the form of totally avoiding other people, but in its more covert form, it can look like, going to the social event, even acting friendly, but then avoiding being real with people, holding them at arm's length with small talk, never really joining them in any kind of bonding activity. For a person who gets triggered by people, isolating often feels like it's the right and best and most self-caring thing that you can do in the moment. When you have to make the decision about whether to go out with a friend or go to a party or invite someone to dinner, well, there's a temptation to make an excuse in the short term because it relieves stress that tends to hijack your mind. You might regret it later, but saying yes to people can immediately dysregulate your nervous system. Do you experience this? Neurological dysregulation is that stressed and discombobulated feeling that everyone feels sometimes, but that can be extra intense and extra frequent for people who were abused or neglected as kids. When we get triggered by a criticism or by hurrying or fearing that we don't belong in a group, it can cause a whole cascade of emotional and physiological and cognitive changes, glitches really, that make it hard to function. So a party can be hard. An argument can cost 3 days of being able to focus. And until you learn to heal your dysregulation, you'll unconsciously arrange your life to avoid triggers that bring on that neurological chaos and that set you back. And that means isolating. Now, when I say trigger, I don't mean the way that the word is tossed around to say something you don't like or that makes you uncomfortable. I'm talking about an experience or a thought, a stimulus that causes neurological dysregulation to kick in. And for a person who relies heavily on isolation to manage their CPTSD symptoms, being with people is like standing in a field with a tornado coming. You might not be totally conscious of it, but an anxiety kind of revs up at the thought of having to deal with people, and it can make you feel helpless and scared. And honestly, the choice to isolate in any given situation can feel good. It can feel empowering, as if you're taking care of yourself. And sometimes you are. So you say no to invitations, or you say yes, but then cancel at the last minute, or you end a dating relationship, or you ghost a friend who has texted you to ask why they haven't heard from you. And you may have become a master of excuses, making up illnesses, traffic jams, family emergencies, so that people wouldn't see what was really going on with you, which is that you can't deal with them. Not right now. It felt like too much. So you were isolating just to feel safe and feel like you could have a little breathing room. It's understandable. But here's the thing. If you keep using isolation to manage your CPTSD triggers, just about every option in your life will gradually close off to you. That's how it happens. You're not there to keep the door open, and people and opportunities will move on without you. You can heal this, but get ready because it takes honesty to face it, to really admit that it's not the world, but you who has been holding you apart. And I know there are times when people do act cliquish and uninclusive and cruel, but when we're isolating, we're doing most of that ourselves. If you isolate, you may have become good at justifying it, a little too good. I get letters, and you see it in the comments where people will just say things like, people are just horrible. Everyone out there is just out for themselves. Or they say, dating is just a cesspool where they just want to use you. Or all jobs are just exploitation by greedy capitalists trying to get everything they can from you. Then they throw you out like garbage. These are trauma-driven beliefs. They start as a reflexive reaction to something that did happen, a hurt, an injustice, but they calcify into hard walls around you, making you intense to be around, rigid in your thinking, and making it harder and harder for you to feel comfortable participating in life. So you slip into loneliness. Maybe you're good at tolerating your loneliness. I get letters from people like all the time, but you know what? I don't want you to be too good at being lonely. It's better to be uncomfortable with loneliness. It's better to be sad about the relationships that are lost or blocked for you because of your trauma. It is sad. And that grief and that discomfort with being alone is what is going to lift you back into connection with people. And this time, if you can learn to heal those triggers that make dealing with people so difficult, you can start to connect with them just one little step at a time. And I'll come back to explain how to do that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about that free and peaceful feeling that you're craving, that you get, even if just for a moment, when you isolate. Once you get triggered and your heart races and your emotions rise up out of their normal, regulated levels, your mind starts distorting things. That's what CPTSD does. You feel overwhelmed. Literally, your brain can't process thoughts and feelings, so they're building up. There's a lot going on up here. And this is when traumatized people will become vulnerable to slipping into their pattern. You know what I mean by pattern? Some people go blank and defenseless. Some will frantically start trying to make everybody happy, fearing they're about to alienate everyone. Other people will lash out and start yelling. And some of us withdraw and find a way to excuse ourselves from participating without ever explaining why and trying not even to be noticed. We all have a few patterns, but usually one or two will dominate. And this is being driven by neurological dysregulation. It amplifies the stress feelings you already have, and it makes them hard to manage, hard to bounce back from. So there's a huge temptation to just avoid the triggers altogether, or most of the time look like you're showing up, but avoid any real connection. And those are strategies that you can use to keep looking like everything's okay. But really, you're just keeping your relationships as hollow as possible. You're not showing up for people, and soon they're not showing up for you. So isolating yourself is an instant solution to the stress you feel when your CPTSD symptoms are triggered. Could be an argument, a mistake, something embarrassing. You feel rejected or judged or ugly, or you feel like people are placing demands on you that are more than you can handle. It seems like it's going to be exhausting if you let anybody in, right? It can feel like it's going to be a marathon that just won't ever end. So it's very tempting. Isolating is a way that you can shut the door on all those unpleasant feelings and anxieties for a while. Now, if isolating feels empowering and helps you to have control over your time and energy, maybe it's showing you that you need a way to protect yourself. Instead of making excuses, you could work on having boundaries. You can practice the words and the actions that make it okay for you to hang out for a little while and then go home. You need it to be okay to be social, but also it needs to be okay to say no when people ask something of you. A lot of us isolate just to prevent ourselves from giving away all our time and energy to people who ask, just because we don't know how to say no. It's too stressful. It is possible to be friendly while saying no. Now watch your thinking, because another thought that people have while isolating is that pulling away from people is only temporary. I'm just doing this for a minute. You just need a rest. I just don't like this one person. I just need a little bit of self-care time. And it feels like self-care, doesn't it? It's like a little spa for one with Netflix and DoorDash. And it feels like you're doing something good for yourself. But really, how does it feel? How does it feel after you've done it a couple of days in a row, or a couple of weeks, or a couple of years? If you do it enough times, there's a dread feeling that is really hard to push down. And I know because I've done it. It tends to come up and haunt me about 3 a.m, and I can't sleep. Do you ever get this? It just feels like life is passing you by. And feeling this way is, in my experience, it's more stressful than having people in your life and showing up for them and clumsily figuring out how to have boundaries and say no. So when you're promising yourself that soon you're going to get back out there. Just remember, the longer you aren't out there, the harder it gets. And sometimes the isolation will cause you to go deeper into behaviors, anything that makes you feel shame, that trigger an even stronger urge to isolate. So it can be kind of a downward spiral. It can begin to feel like an addiction where you almost want to feel overwhelm or exhaustion, because then you can give yourself permission to just lie down and keep isolating. That's when you know you're in a bad spot. So let's talk about why it's so important to come out of that, to heal that raw place where it feels like people are too treacherous to handle. Now, some of you will argue with me, but here's the fact. You need people in your life. Pets are wonderful, but they're not enough. Even if you didn't have the emotional need for people, your immune system needs to be around people. Your mental health needs to be around people. Your physical health needs to be around people. And when you're actually connecting with people, it has the healthy effect of drawing you out of yourself, out of your preoccupation with hurt or grievances that you hold against others. How do I feel about all this? What's going to happen? I can't forget what they did to me. These are the kind of thoughts that sort of get bigger when you're isolated. And when you're isolated, you can take them too far. Practicing connection feels risky, but it can be rewarding very quickly. And it opens up your day to a little adventure, some delight, some hopefulness, some exercise maybe, some friendship, maybe even romance, maybe. Being with people helps to keep your thinking grounded too, and it helps keep you socially limber. When you hide out for a while, everything feels halting and awkward. I felt that like at the end of the lockdown. I wasn't aware that it was happening when I wasn't hanging out with people, but as soon as I was, I had trouble finding words or knowing what to say. I felt, self-conscious. Now with practice, it got smoother, and that's how it works. We need to be socialized or we get rusty, and we need to feel that we're needed, that what we give matters to people. So I believe strongly that our happiness, it's not just a feeling, it's almost like an organism that can either be destroyed by relationships or it can flourish in relationships. And knowing the difference of who are the people that help you grow, it takes practice. And it means you have to try. You can't do this in isolation. So you can say hello to the cashier when you buy your groceries. You can check on a neighbor. You can run an errand for somebody. You can call somebody who you know could really use a phone call, and take time to listen to them. This is good not just for them, but for you. You need to be playing this role of someone who cares about others. You need this for your continued development, or it traps you. It's like a developmental barrier. You can't mature. Now, some of us can tilt a little too far into people-pleasing and codependence as a sort of backdoor way to connect with them. That will exhaust you soon enough. Real relationships are not transactional, like, I'll clean your kitchen if you drive me to the pharmacy, or I'll listen to you tell me all your health problems if I can tell you about my horrible mother. That kind of exchange will bring both people down. When you help other people, don't expect anything back. Sometimes you will get something back. Some people can't give that, but sometimes they do reciprocate, and this is when you might be tempted to isolate too, so it takes practice to hang in there and allow people to get a little closer to you. See if very slowly and naturally you can allow a friendship to blossom. It's easy when you've been alone a long time to put a lot of pressure on new friendships and then to be hurt that they aren't what you hoped. It's good to spread your friendliness around so no one acquaintance is a life and death situation for you. Either they become your friend or your world becomes terrible. It takes practice to learn to connect. You have everything to gain from persevering with people. We need them so that we can flourish and so that we can become ourselves. And we need them when we're sick or in the hospital or going through a hard time. Now, it might feel impossible for you right now to step out of your comfort zone, but that feeling of difficulty is exactly why now is a good time to fight the urge to isolate. If people trigger you, you can learn to calm those triggers. If you can get mastery over your triggers and the dysregulation that results, and you can, you'll have more flexibility to hang out with a variety of people and have fun in all kinds of situations. The worst thing you can do to a child is shut them out. Shut them out of your love as a parent, ignore their needs, exclude them from the family, and just act like it's no big deal at all. What amazes me about some of the people in our community here who watch the videos and comment and share their stories is how they rise up with this extraordinary strength and an ability to love and live their lives. And the only thing wrong is that they carry this doubt that they did something wrong. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Josie, and she writes, "Dear crappy childhood fairy, when I first imagined writing this letter, I was a teary-eyed mess, but right now I feel more clear-headed and aware of what I actually need help with. I have a tendency toward delusion and sugarcoating, so I appreciate directness and will try to be as direct and concise as I can be." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle what Josie tells me here, and then I'll go back on a second reading and respond to that. But let's read through and see what Josie's got going on. For years, I thought my family hated me. I never felt like I got the amount of love I needed or wanted from them. As the oldest girl in an immigrant household, I was always expected to take care of my little brothers and sisters, and my needs and wants never mattered. For example, I remember taking my little sister to dance classes where some of the girls were my age, but taking dance classes was never an option for me. I cooked and cleaned up for them. Having a recent conversation with my brother where I explained that I hated feeling like the maid of the family, he said, No, you were just big sis," which made me angrier than I could verbalize to him. I felt like part of it was the way I looked. My skin is darker and my hair is kinkier than anyone else's in the family. My parents told us it was because my mom drank colas when she was pregnant with me, and so none of us were allowed to drink colas as a kid. I guess so no one else would look like me. But I also know or think that it was part of my mom's programming. She was the oldest girl in her family and was treated poorly by my grandmother and did all the terrible things she said my grandma did to her, to me. Things like getting all her other kids nice Christmas gifts and then getting my mother nothing, or celebrating their birthdays and not my mother's. My mom did this to me my entire childhood. But lucky for me, I'm great with delusion. I would save all year and get myself gifts for my birthday and bake my own cake and invite everyone to celebrate with me. I would secretly wrap my own Christmas gifts and put them under the tree and pretend that other people had gotten those gifts for me. Whew. After a series of events happened, like my family renting out an event hall and throwing a surprise birthday party for my little brother without ever inviting me or telling me about it, and like my other little brother taking advantage of me while everyone in the family knew what he was doing and didn't tell me about it, I came to a conclusion that actually seems closer to reality, which is that my family doesn't hate me. They're just indifferent to me, and that hurts me a lot. I want to be loved by them, and I cannot make them love me. I have been getting better with the truth and with facing reality and creating some detachment. However, I just found something out a couple days ago that really shook me to the core. And here comes where I need advice. My mom and I were talking about the increasing cost of health insurance, and she started reminiscing on when she had great insurance when we were kids. And I told her I never got to experience that because I was never allowed on her insurance. And I repeated what she had always told me. There was a limit of people allowed on her health insurance, and so my little brothers and sisters had to be on it, and me and my brother couldn't because we're the oldest. This time around, she revealed the truth that it would have cost an additional $200 a month to have me and my brother on it, and my brother never got sick, so she didn't think it was worth it. I kept my composure and just asked, but what about me? I was a sick kid and had always been one. I had heart issues that required me to see a specialist and to take ongoing medication from age 10 until I finally stopped at age 23. She just said, well, you always just took care of yourself. I kept the conversation going, but the next day at my new job, I couldn't concentrate. Tears kept welling in my eyes, and I felt myself getting sick. I took a walk and tried the techniques I've learned about finding what's going on with me because I often don't know, and I broke down on my knees. I ran to the bathroom for cover, but I kept picturing teenage me scrambling to figure out how to pay for my prescriptions. How I used to wait for my doctor to come out during his smoke break and beg him to write my refill prescriptions for me because I couldn't afford the office visit. When he told me one of my parents would have to come in for my next visit, I stopped going to him completely and started going to free clinics and just seeing if they would write a prescription for me. They'd think it was for some STD and tell me I needed an office visit, but when they saw it was ongoing care for my heart, they'd often just write it. I got so sick one time at school, but already had more medical bills than my $7 an hour could pay for, and just told my friends and roommate to let me die. It was food poisoning, and I survived, but all the memories of what not having health insurance meant for me as a child came rushing back, and I found it hard to think or concentrate on my work. I also got physically sick. It could be a coincidence, but I've gone through this enough where I recognize what heartbreak can do to my physical well-being. Now here's where I need your advice, Anna. For the last few months, I've been in a terrible financial situation and have just finally gotten a great job where I'll make more money than I ever have. My family issues and my broken heart about it has a tendency to overwhelm me and hijack my brain. What should I do that I can keep a clear heart and mind and do work without being overtaken by emotions over the lack of love I feel from my family and the world? I also don't have any friends or romantic interests, so I'm really starting at ground zero. Those relationships often mirror my family dynamic. How can I start to have a family of my own and make friends? I'm 36 and scared that I will become irrevocably broken if I don't control how I approach life or handle heartbreak. I guess what I really need to know is how can I be less sensitive to heartbreak or have a less fragile heart? I know sound advice might be to stay away from the people who hurt you, but my family's very important to me, even if I'm not important to them. I live 1,000 miles away, but I think of them often and constantly long for us to be closer emotionally. I don't think they do the things they do intentionally to hurt me, though my mom has done lots of intentional stuff to hurt me. Wait a minute. It's confusing to me. There it is. When I was moving away last time, she threw a going away party for me and invited my siblings and cousins. The only thing is, she told everyone it was a surprise, but she never invited me or told me about it. So when I moved away, no one was around to see me off, and no one would answer my call, and I felt like I was being cast out. It's one of those memories that's really hard to believe, but I have several more stories just like that one. She told everyone that I must have forgotten. She told me, but how could I have forgotten that? Yeah. If I drank, it'd be easier to believe that she forgot to tell me and all her other excuses, like why she's never visited in 7 years, but I don't like to drink when I'm sad. My mom is a sensitive spot for me because I just always really wanted a mother, and my mom never had a connection to me. But I have stories about my siblings and dad too. My dad introducing me with a disclaimer that his other daughters are pretty and have light skin, or even my ex who did something humiliating to me last time I saw him, maybe to get back at me for breaking up with him. He's pretty much the only non-family member I speak to, and he's been a good friend, or maybe not. I don't know actually, but he's there. Basically, the people who are important to me also dysregulate me with all these emotions and memories. If I can't get rid of them, is there anything I can do to maintain myself and be productive at work? I'd really appreciate your advice, Josie. You know, I got this letter and I was like, oh, it's long. I'm going to ask this person to cut it down, but I read it. I can't really do without a word of it to understand this tender person. And I'm very moved by this, and I know you are too out there. This is really terrible. This is like some things I'm familiar with. Some of it I went through as a kid, but nothing like this magnitude. And this is what amazes me about you, Josie, is that you're just asking, like, how can I still keep loving them and get on with my life? And it's a beautiful question. And I know a lot of people would just be like, categorically, you cannot keep having contact. So let's break that down. You thought they hated you. You never got the love you needed. No, you did not. You were the oldest girl in an immigrant household, so you were expected to take care of everyone. I was the oldest girl. We weren't immigrants, but it was alcoholism. And I did have to take care of the younger ones. And they just overlooked my needs, but that's about, I could say parallels, but the extremity of this is just so heartbreaking to me. And so taking your sister to dance classes, and there were older girls your age there, but you didn't get to have the lessons. Nobody ever discussed that. And also, you know, by then, whatever age that was, you had already figured out, like, don't even ask, don't ask about it. It's just how it is. And then this thing about you believe it's partly because your skin is darker and your hair is kinkier than anyone else in the family. And I wondered about that because it came up again that your dad would introduce you as, the other sisters are pretty and light-skinned and you're not. That is just so abusive, and trying to introduce their, just putting self-hatred on you for your skin. I mean, when you have a little child, their skin is something you love like it's your own, you never want them to get hurt. You never want them to think less of themselves. So what the heck were they doing here? All right, I'm going to float a little theory here. I don't know. It's so messed up that sometimes I wouldn't introduce something, but is it possible you have a different dad? Is that way your parents are acting like they just tolerate you, but they won't really take care of you? I don't know. It's not an excuse, but I'm just wondering, if your appearance is different. So they have some kind of internalized racism, I take it. And then they said it was because your mom drank colas when she was pregnant and then nobody could drink it. Oh my gosh, it could make you dark, which is just the stupidest thing I ever heard. And then, and I see why it hurt you. We have to avoid being like your sister. And then it was part of her programming. So this was really part of the mystery, is that she was treated the same way. She was overlooked. She was cast out. When you said you feel like you've been cast out, honey, you were cast out. This is like the actual thing. So supposedly your mom was cast out and now she's doing the same thing to you. Nobody who's right in the head does this to their children. I'm just saying, even if it happened to her, it's not right. I had a lot of stuff happen to me and I didn't do it to my kids. The birthdays, yeah. This thing about parties, not inviting you to your brother's party. And then at the end of your letter where you say they had a going away party for you and everybody was invited but you, this is some serious malicious BS going on. And I don't diagnose people, but this is one of the signs of narcissism, a certain kind of narcissism. And it does seem like that could be something going on where there's no empathy at all. But what's interesting about you is your strong spirit. My goodness. So you said, lucky me, I'm great with delusion. And you're just like a poster child for the rest of us to demonstrate, yeah, that's what we do. We see love where there is no love. And I would have expected with this background, I was going to get a limerence letter from you. And that's not what's going on. So that's cool. But it's like you have magical thinking about your family, about somehow, you really want the completion of having the love of your family and especially your mother. And you're not able to reckon with this realistically. And so that was kind of the theme here is you said, I have a tendency toward delusion and sugarcoating. So yeah, but I understand that. It's called Pollyanna-ish. And being a Pollyanna, and Pollyanna brought a lot of positivity to some very down people. So it's an archetype that I've always loved myself. And it's a superpower that you can bring to things, and then it becomes dysfunctional. It doesn't mean you can never be Pollyanna, but you have to use critical thinking. So I'm just looking at this situation with your family. And they just sound really, really awful to you. They seem to have a great time together, but they are awful to you. And something is wrong with people who do that. It seems like your siblings were maybe conditioned by your mom to treat you the same way she did. That's what happens. You got black sheeped, right? Gosh, though, I can hardly put my words together. I just feel so heavy and sad about this. I'd love to see you get free of the idea that there's something that you can do to make them love you. Clearly, there's nothing you can do because it's not about you. It's some trip. So I've heard that sometimes narcissist parents, they will really hate on the child who has the same gender because it's competition. Yeah. So I don't know. Nothing really makes sense here. And I think the commenters might be able to, suggest something they perceive in all of this. Okay, this got me, the insurance. Okay, this is where it just sort of goes surreal. So you never had insurance and you were talking about it and you thought it was because she couldn't, there was no way she could. It wasn't allowed, but it was allowed. It's just that to have that many kids, there was going to be what's called a copay. It wasn't you personally who cost more. It was the cost of having however many kids she had. It wasn't you. I just want to tell you that, it's not your fault it was $200. Or your brother's fault, it was $200 because of the number of kids and the plan covering X number of kids and not that many, which is a bummer too in its own right. But she told you she couldn't, and then she just mentioned your brother. And I'll tell you a secret. This happened with my mom when she was dying. She had not like lost her lucidity, but I said something about I needed to take time off from work because I wanted to see my family. And she looked at me all weird. And I said, what? She said, I just never thought of you as having a family. And that was in a way helpful to me, because when they do something this crazy, then it's just clear. It's like you're off the hook. It's nothing you did, and nothing you do can change it. So what you have here is a very practical problem. Oh, this thing about the heart, though, I just have to address this, Josie. That she didn't insure you when you had a heart defect, and that you had to go use your $7 an hour wages to get heart medication is like so far beyond the pale. I can't even believe it. I do believe you, though. I do believe you. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm just saying I just can't believe that somebody got away with such abuse. That's just like, what's the word for that kind of abuse? What's the word for it? It's like intentionally cruel neglect. And you needed the medicine, and then you go, and your story, this is why I believe you, your little details of like, they'd think it was an STD. They would, right? And then they're like, oh, it's heart medicine. Sure, here you go. And then getting food poisoning and thinking you're dying and feeling that full weight of like, I don't have anybody. So I want to talk to you about that. So you started a new job, and what you're worried about is doing well is going to kick up the dust on all these feelings of loss and incompletion and the way your family has not given you the love that you deserve and want. See, I'm not going to say need. I'm going to have to like draw the line here and say, you actually don't need their love. It's a tragedy. They didn't give it to you. You can't ever get back that time when they were supposed to give it, but you can make a wonderful life right now. And part of it, I think, is just facing reality. Like, we're all in this boat, right? To see the reality of our condition when we have CPTSD. We know that we have quirky ways of seeing things and sort of self-sabotaging behaviors. And the solution is always going to begin when we can face honestly the reality of our condition, which I think you have, because you say, I do this delusion thing. You're doing it. You know it's a delusion, but you can't stop, and it upsets you, and it leaks into your work, and it sabotages your ability to do a good job. This is a quality problem, Josie. I'm proud of you for getting this far, that you can be confronting this problem that basically we all have, that the trauma leaks back in. It leaks back in, especially when we're doing well. It leaks back in when bad things happen, and it leaks in when good things happen, and you have a good thing. So this is a really good question. All right, so I want to tell you a story from my life. So there was a time, I had a boyfriend who died. I was a single mom. I had 2 kids. I was very lonely, and this is the last time that I went to a therapist. It didn't end up being helpful, but I do remember something helpful that she said, or something enlightening that she said. I was crying and saying, I was in the hospital 14 times for major surgery. Most of the time I had no visitors. Most of the time I had nobody to drive me home. The look on the face of the nurses when they'd be like, well, don't you have somebody who can come and get you? And I didn't. Certainly not after 14 times. I had a couple people who might do it once, and I had to use them up. And I asked her, what's wrong with me that it's like this? And she basically just did the math for me. She's like, you don't have a mom. Your sister is not in your life. You don't have a husband anymore. And those are the people who would normally take care of you and pick you up at the hospital. And those are the people who would populate your life and spend holidays with you, Josie, and be your go-to people when you had a hard day or great news or anything like that. So we're all meant to have this cast of characters, and you don't have yours. Like, they're living, but they don't work. They're broken. They don't give you that. And so I really want to advocate for you and say it takes time, but you need a community of good friends. And when you grew up with trauma, like, that sometimes feels like an impossible dream, but you can do. I have a course on how to do it. It's called Connection Boot Camp, and there's always a link to it down below in the description section if you want to check that out. You need friends, and you need people who are in the role of family, which is usually going to be a partner. And so you say you're 36, you'd like to have a family of your own, and you want to heal and you want to do that. So yeah, it's time to get a partner. And getting a partner is wake-up call time, because if you're still entangled with your family and still trying to get their validation and set things right with them by, I don't know, somehow like mentally or tap dancing nicely enough that they would finally go, oh, Josie's amazing, we made a mistake. Like, they don't sound like people who can possibly get it or produce that. It just doesn't sound like it's coming, but there are people who can do that. I'm a person who sees it. I see the greatness of you. I think we're going to get a chorus in the comments of people sending you love and validation and support and encouragement to keep going in your life. So this thing where it leaks back in, it's like thoughts that creep into your mind and they intrude and they give you a huge emotional reaction, and then you're all dysregulated and you can't do it. So you're like, oh, the people I love dysregulate me. Well, yeah, it's not just the dysregulation though. It's the whole like terrible curtain that comes down on you when you are connected to those people, when you're connected in that special magical way where you want something from them. And you know what's going to happen. So just for the delusion, I'm just here to go, that thing where you think it's going to change, it's not going to change. You can have them in your life. Many people do. But a change of perspective can make it a lot less painful, where you go in knowing and you're supported by friends who are basically not literally holding your hand perhaps, but staying, like you're texting them, all right, I'm going to go in now. I'm going to spend half an hour with my mom. Can I text you when I'm done? It's called bookending. And they go, yes, I'll be right here. So then you go, okay, I did it. Oh gosh, that was so intense. And they'll go, how'd it go? And you can tell them, maybe you call them, maybe you text them. And you start to tell the truth in real time about how this is going. Because when we can't tell the truth in real time, you can't wait until maybe years from now you'll be in a therapist's office and you can talk about this. Yeah, you can tell the truth then, and the therapist will care, and I care. But in real time, you kind of need to not go into denial. That's what needs to happen here, because what they did to you, the pattern that happens to people, they lose their sense of self and they shut themselves down. And that's like a terrible thing. You don't want that to happen. I can really hear that you are in there. You are in there. You're not a shut down person. You're feeling your feelings. You're very self-aware that going into this job could be a challenge for you. I think you're doing really, really well. But that part where you don't have friends is where you have a vulnerability that could really lead to you just shutting down or trying to go back in. And all the psychological gymnastics you have to do to make that work, the things you have to tell yourself about yourself to justify the way they treat you, the way they see you. They don't see you at all. So what friends can do is help you have a thought barrier there where it's like, I hear what they're saying, I see what they're doing. It does hurt my feelings, but I know it's not true. That would empower you to be able to have some visits with them. But you really may want to look at my Ninja Boundaries video about that. There's a way that you can visit really difficult people, but you have to completely eliminate your expectation that they're going to give you something better than they ever did before. It's really just about making a conscious decision that you want to pay a visit, you want to see how they're doing or say hello or give them a present or whatever. But you have to really be self-disciplined and do your homework and prepare, not to think if I give them a present, they'll give me a present. They're not, right? Or if they do, well, whoop-de-doo. And if you tell them, look, I love you, I miss you, they're going to tell me. Again, if they do, we are in a whole context here where it's simply not a supportive relationship. It's not the person that you can go to. That person isn't in your family where you can just say, gosh, I'm feeling a lot of doubt about something. Can you help me figure out what's the right thing to do? They're not your people, but your people exist. If you want to come into our membership program here, we would love to have you. We are your people. We get it. And we have a lot of strategies here for when you want to have a relationship with difficult people, or you haven't decided yet if you do, and you need time to test the waters and kind of see what you can handle. And to be honest with other people, when you say, oh yeah, I can handle this, it's fine. When you're honest with other people, it's easier to acknowledge things that you can't handle, things that are too much, when you have to take a break. So it's just a very positive thing. And you get to watch how other people how they handle their difficult family relationships. I mean, we have some doozies here. Yours makes me so sad. It's so wrong. It's just so wrong. Something is so wrong with your mom and how she kind of brainwashed the family about you. So I do favor you having lots and lots of space from them and hanging out with people who think you're great so that you can start to reprogram yourself, get out of the brainwashing. You know, you're not this terrible person who deserves it. And you also don't have to live in fantasy to get every little bit of happiness you ever have. You can have that in the real world. You sound lovely. You sound caring and compassionate, and great things are in you. When somebody lives through something like this and has the insight that you're demonstrating about knowing that it's hard for you to accept reality and, you know, struggling with good questions of, you know, how do I make sure I show up for my job? I just have so much confidence in you, Josie. I have a good feeling about you that as you begin to practice setting this inner boundary, and the boundary, there's boundaries in between, like all in and all out. You can have medium boundaries and you can move the boundary as needed. It's so good though when you have a boundary advocate friend, you know, who's there to kind of think this through with and help you stay real with yourself and not go into the la-la land where it's like, it's okay, I can tolerate any amount of abuse. It's okay. No, it's fine. Like, you don't want to let yourself do that. And so what's happening to you now is you have pain, you have more crying, you have more anxiety about it. And I think that's normal. It's normal. As we begin to face what really happened, there's going to be more feelings. And there's that wisdom of our beings, you know, our bodies and our minds and our hearts and our souls, they kind of know. It's like, oh, are we going to get some support now to look at this? Because I would like to tell you something. When people do my daily practice technique, which by the way, you might like that. It's a free course. Anybody can take it. It's a specific writing technique followed by a meditation technique. And I don't know, you mentioned writing a meditation, so I think you know something about it, or maybe you have your own version, but it's what I started using 30 years ago and what helped me get out of, you know, just complete entrapment in my trauma-driven thinking and behavior. Got me a window open with fresh air and then a door, and then I was out. And I still do it twice a day because that's the nature of CPTSD, is it kind of creeps back in. And so you can support yourself. And I just encourage you, like, embrace the fact that those of us who went through something as hard as you did, it's a maintenance thing. We have to maintain. It didn't, you know, something did get injured, and there's so much of it we can heal. And some of it, you might get like an insight that will permanently help you with something, but a lot of it is just maintenance to kind of keep yourself in a good, aware, regulated, supported space. That is so much of the object of the game. It's why isolation is just terrible for people who are going through what you're going through. So that is what I recommend you make your priority, not your family. You can figure that out later. But friendships. One thing you could try is a 12-step group too. And that's definitely what I did. I was at that alone place. I didn't know who to turn to, and I started going to meetings. And you would qualify for the adult children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families 12-step fellowship. And it's pretty neat. And I encourage you to check it out. You can look it up online, and there's meetings in person and online, and a lot of people who are, you know, there to connect with you if you feel like you want to check that out. So I always say the same thing when people are trying to make a big change like you are. You need tools that work for you, and you need support of people who get you. So you can find that here, 12-step programs. Perhaps you'll find it in some group out there with a therapist. But don't just let this go. Like, just promise yourself you're going to take this step to support yourself to make this transition into the world and this wonderful job. And congratulations on landing a good job. Well done. If you were neglected or abused when you were a kid, and you've struggled all your life to feel like you truly are included in groups, I have something important for you to know. That is a trauma symptom. Feeling like you don't belong. It could happen to anyone, but it's especially common in people who didn't receive adequate time and love and connection from their parents. I want you to know this is normal, and also that healing this is possible. How do you feel when you try to take part in a group? It's super common for those of us who grew up with abuse and neglect to feel as adults that we're somehow not quite part of things, where you feel like you're on the outside of groups, sort of in it, but mostly on the outside. Traumatized people describe it as feeling phony or like a fraud or like there's a glass wall around them or a membrane or they just hate it or they have to fake it. But it's still, most of us have the desire to feel like we belong. And the worst of it is, in many cases, we could belong, but the way that groups agitate us and fill us up with fear makes us pull away. Do you have this? Where you start as a full participant, but then withdraw over time. You uninclude yourself. I've done this so many times, and in my mind, at the time anyway, I can justify it. You know, they suck. This is not the right group for me. They don't get me. I'm not like them. But in the end, withdrawing from everything leaves you lonely. And participating in groups is a big way that we fulfill our need for meaning in our lives. So even when you justify pulling away from people, it never stops hurting. And maybe you're resigned to the fact that groups are not for you, but that would be a terrible loss. The feeling of belonging with other people is a real need that all people have psychologically and emotionally. It's not a weakness. Lions have it. Wolves have it. Strong people need a feeling of belonging too. So you might be still trying, joining groups, getting uncomfortable, or feeling excluded, and you might be excluded. That does happen. But when you feel excluded no matter what, and then drop out again, there it is. Maybe you think in each case that the problem is the other people, and sometimes it could be true. It really could. But the telltale sign that this could be a personal choice, even when it doesn't feel like it, is that you're almost always at about the same distance from the center of the group. And by that I mean every group has a center, right? A leader or a couple of people who are at the very middle, and all around them are the people who put a lot of time and energy into the group, and a little further out are the people who are a little less involved. They're influential maybe, they're involved, but not so much. And then at the periphery, there's like people who are barely involved. In my case, I used to always like to settle about 4/5 of the way out from the center. And I was invited to the party, so to speak, but I wouldn't take part in making the party happen, and I'd feel alienated. I'd start out motivated and thinking, you know, this time is going to be different. I finally found my people. I want to be involved with this. And then I'd take an active role, like volunteering to help organize a big fundraiser for my kids' school. And, you know, thinking temporarily, now all the moms will be my friend, right? But with my childhood PTSD symptoms, I was really uncomfortable in groups where people were normal, or people I considered normal anyway. It was loaded with emotional triggers for me. And sooner or later, usually sooner, I would find some reason to pull back. I might go to about halfway out of the circle first, but eventually I'd quit the group. Being part of something was, and in some areas of my life still is, kind of stressful for me. And I understand better now why. In the past, I used to think my trouble with groups was just one episode of bad luck after another. The wrong mom's group, the wrong co-workers, the wrong 12-step friends, the wrong boyfriend. There really is such a thing as the wrong people, right? But for me, there was this pattern, and I wanted those friends, and then I pulled away. And I'd think, you know, I guess I'm just really unique, and I never saw that it was a consistent pattern until I had a lot of healing from dysregulation and started to have some clarity. Now, if you're new to my channel, dysregulation, specifically neurological dysregulation, it's the core trauma wound from childhood that can drive so many other symptoms that you might be experiencing. And not a lot of people talk about it. It's basically an injury to your nervous system resulting from neglect, mostly abuse and neglect when you were small. When you're under stress, which is, you know, a lot of social interactions for people who have CPTSD, your brain waves and emotions will go out of sync. So there's some symptoms you don't really feel as a result, but they're very strong. Some you can feel, like you feel spaced out or discombobulated or clumsy, or you might have over-the-top emotions where, you know, instead of feeling like a bit hurt or offended, can turn into you lashing out or feeling like you just have to pull away. dealing with a lot of people can be like an assault on your senses, really, and it gets really emotional. It's like a high school experience that never ends, I always say. So it's hard to function well when you feel that way and when your nervous system is dysregulated. So unconsciously, we're pretty motivated to avoid dysregulation. It messes everything up. In many cases, that's why there is this urge to pull away from people in groups. Childhood PTSD is not the same thing as introversion, but I suspect there are similarities in that being social with people can take more energy than it gives because you're just working so hard with CPTSD to act normal, to deal with everybody. Pulling away from groups works in the short term. You can stay regulated, but in some important ways, cutting yourself off from other people is going to block you from having a happy and fulfilling life. And I know some of you will insist you want nothing to do with other people, and if that's true, there's no need for you to watch this video. This is for people who struggle to participate with other people, but who want the tools and support to do it better, who want what that can bring into their lives, want to feel at ease with it. You know, we need people. We need them on a practical level, and we need relationships if we're going to start healing the wounds of trauma. And these wounds are largely relational wounds in the first place. They affect your nervous system, but they were caused by what happened between you and other people. So the healing needs to happen before you have social relationships, yes, but also within social relationships, the healing needs to happen. The little interactions is where you get to practice what you're learning and where you get nourished emotionally. And even though sometimes there's pain involved, there's criticism, there's rejection, there's genuinely being different in a group where everyone else seems to feel connected, but that can get easier. Like everyone else, you need a sense of belonging. So it's natural that you'd gravitate to groups, but toward the outer edges at first. It's a little more manageable. You can be around people and be social a little bit, but just keep one foot out the door in case you need to get the heck out of there. And it's okay to do that. Healthy groups have roles and space for many kinds of people, and it's okay not to participate fully, for a while or forever. Life would be great if you could keep going like this, soaking up the feeling of belonging in the group, but not risking your emotions and not getting too involved. The problem is that relationships that are all on the periphery of groups make it really hard to develop meaning in your life. You need some friction. You need some contact with people to develop social skills. And that's one big area where I teach people who are healing from past trauma. Everyone needs contact. Staying on the periphery keeps contact shallow. That's what we want at first. That's how we can keep from setting off old triggers. But shallow connections take a toll. The connectedness we crave is more like a future fantasy when you're just surrounded by shallow relationships. If you're doing that, then in the present, you're still isolating. And then what starts is a kind of delay in your development that can become a full-on deficiency. And next thing you know, you're getting more isolated than ever. And that is how it happens. By playing it safe, you stay stuck. You need to be taking some risks to grow your comfort zone a little wider. There are normal ups and downs involved in having friends and being part of groups. If you're not continuously growing through experiencing the normal ups and downs of being in friendships and groups, you risk not only not being included anymore, but you can start to get very hard to include. And what it is, and this will sound harsh, but avoiding people leads to self-centeredness. Not sharing yourself with other people is an emergency protection measure. It's not a way to live your whole life. The possibility of connecting with people is all around us. There are so many ways that you can begin to, take an action in this way. If somebody has a potluck, bring something, or you can join a choir, or take a quilting class, or invite friends out for a hike. When you show up for people in your life, you grow less fragile and more flexible and more connected and more included. And yes, it's demanding to be included. Isolation sounds so peaceful as an option, but if you allow isolation to take root long term, it will take over, and your very worst traits will have this huge, fertile space to take root. People in isolation grow crabbier, they grow more self-centered, They grow more bitter, they grow more paranoid. And then it gets harder to turn the ship back towards connection again because you've gotten too eccentric, too awkward. I've called this before turning weird on YouTube, and some people complain they feel like that's too harsh, but I can certainly say for me, I get weird in isolation. And I don't mean good weird. Have you ever felt this beginning to happen to you? Have you seen it in other people? I really noticed this in myself when lockdown was ending and I started being able to hang out with people again. And I was rough on the edges. I angered easily. I was edgy. I complained a lot. I could hear myself and I didn't feel like it sounded right. So take your alone time. That's called solitude. And then keep chipping away at your capacity to stay connected. Work on it. I know many of you watching this video are there right now wondering if any change is possible or worth it. And I just want to tell you, yes, it is worth it and it's possible. You just start with one small action. You show up. And I teach a bunch of ways you can do this in my Connection Bootcamp, which is like a 30-day online course that helps you keep taking positive actions each day and develop new skills very slowly to have good relationships. You can check that out in the links in the description section below any of my videos anytime. But take a shower, put on your coat, go say hello to some people. Go back to a group you used to like. Pay a visit to a friend who you've been neglecting. Sign up for some community activity, a cancer walk, a litter cleanup day, a blood drive. Whatever people around you are doing to get together, that's why they're doing it too. Doing something positive together brings them together and makes them feel connected. If you do one thing like this every other day, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, in a couple of weeks, you'll find yourself included again. You'll feel it and people will begin to invite you to things. It might take time, but the need to be included is not just a weakness. It's primal. We're born into community, and as much as we may want to escape it sometimes and be independent, we never can escape, not really. And evolutionary biologists will tell you it's a survival strategy so that you have warmth and food and protection from predators and all that stuff. But it's not just physical or evolutionary. Inclusion is just as important for the growth and development of your being, for your intellect, for your spirit, for your maturity. Because without inclusion in human relationships, the blossoming of the whole you, the process of becoming your real self gets arrested. It can't fully happen. So fulfillment can't come to you in those circumstances. Being included and connected is also important for your physical health, your brain health, your immune system, your endocrine system. Being included creates a support system of people who care about you and who can come to your aid if you're broke or lonely or feeling like your life is falling apart. Some of you have heard the story. I had years in my life when I was in and out of the hospital and had no one to pick me up. It was devastating. It was a real wake-up call. You're not meant to go through all that alone. You've probably done it before, but let's just say right now that you should never have to go through life's hardships alone. Not ever again. And healing can bring that connection back to you. One-on-one relationships are one thing, they're good, and if you have childhood PTSD, those can be just as hard as being part of a group. You need both. I know it feels hard, and that's because it is hard. But keep trying. Keep participating. The reward for doing this work is that you get to be included. And included is secretly where we all want to be.